Wanted to welcome you to our June edition of First Friday. Brooke Edmunds, who is the OSU Extension Community Horticulturist in Marion, Polk, Lynn, and Benton counties. She oversees the Master Gardener volunteer programs in each county, teaches online and in-person gardening classes, and answers hundreds of gardening questions each year. Brooke's background is in plant pathology and horticulture. She has a PhD in plant pathology from North Carolina State University and her MS and BS from Iowa State University. She lives in Salem and greatly enjoys gardening with her kids and exploring Oregon's coast trails. So, Brooke, thank you for joining us today.
Well, I'm really happy to be here today. Yes, I do work for OSU Extension, so just a little plug about if you're not familiar with Extension. So we are statewide. We're through Oregon State University, and we provide information and expertise to help folks in the community. So just like the Soil and Water Conservation District, we have many programs as well. And we are here in Marion County. Our office is just in downtown Salem on Capitol Street. And we have lots of different programs available depending on your interests. So one of the big ones we have is our 4-H Youth Development Program, Master Gardeners, which I do encourage you all to become a Master Gardener. And then tons of other programs depending on your interest. If you're urban or rural or, whatever you have going on, please look us up and check us out and look and see what we're doing out in the community as well. But you are here today to talk about food and yard waste. And so here's kind of where we're going to be going today. So we're going to show you a little bit of data, not too much. We have some graphs though, talking about how much food and yard waste is there. So sort of get a handle on what we have and where does it quote unquote go? What happens to it after we're done with it? And then some practical tips on what we can do in our own homes, and then some resources in other community organizations that you might want to get involved with if this is your passion topic. All right, so we are going to dive in. There's a lot of data on food waste, maybe not quite so much on yard waste, but there is a lot on food waste. So I just wanted to pull this up really quick to sort of set the stage, I guess, on food waste. It's estimated that about 1/3 of all of our food produced is wasted. And this is not just us, eating and having some kitchen scraps left over. This is through the whole production system of growing and producing food. At every stage, there's a lot of waste there. So we at our homes, and commercial uses, we do waste a lot of food. But over the whole system, there is, in a year, enough, all of the fertilizer. If we all went plant-based, we would be able to use all that if we didn't waste it. So lots of information out there on food waste. And this is definitely something that the federal government and then our state governments are interested in tracking as well. So a couple facts and figures. And I have only 3 slides of data. So if you're not a data person, just hang in there for 3 slides and then we'll go on to other more practical tips. There's some really good data, though, out of the EPA, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. And that's what I'm going to share today. Oregon does have some data, but it's a little bit spotty. It's a little bit more county by county. And all of this data, of course, is an estimate. So there aren't people out there, tracking every speck of our garbage. So they do point in time surveys, and they're getting estimates of things. So the next graph I'm going to show you is talking about all of our trash, what they call municipal solid waste, aka our trash. And this is from data that they have in 2018. And so this chart here is showing the things that we are throwing away and the different categories of things. We're not going to talk about all of these categories today, right? We're here to talk and focus on food and yard waste, things that we might see there. But you'll notice, and you probably notice this too in your home or in places where you might work, we do throw away a lot of things. A lot of things go into the trash. So plastics and papers and, wood, glass and whatnot. But look at those big categories down here for food, 21.6%, and yard trimmings. And this is our trash that we're making from, when we're cooking and things. So I'm going to narrow in on these two categories that we're focused in on today. So first, I'm going to show you another graph that talks about yard trimmings or yard waste, and then another one on food so that you can get a sense of where this waste is going. All right. This is the two more graphs if you're not a graph person. So again, this is data from the EPA. So this is US wide, this is estimates, but it does give you a good sense. So this is yard trimming. So things like woody branches, anything that might go into your yard debris bin. And this doesn't account for what we do in our homes. This is if it is being sent out, right? So to a municipal waste. So you have three. So this is showing over a number of years, the years that they've been tracking, right? So 1960 to 2018, this is the data they have available. This is in tons. This is yard waste or yard trimmings. And in yellow up on the top, it's showing there's a large percentage that is composted. That's great. Some of it is sent to what's called energy recovery, so an incinerator. And then some of it does end up in our landfills, right? So you see this trend here with a lot of it being composted, which is fantastic. Now I'm going to switch and show you the data that they have available for food waste, right? So then this graph looks a little bit different. So again, the scales are the same here. So on the bottom, you have the years that they've taken data, and then you have tons of food waste. And this is what is going out in our municipal trash. So after the point of production, but when, if it's getting chopped up and there's, ends of that. So you see a little bit different trend here. So on the very top, this very small yellow part, this is the part that's being composted. Starting in, I think, 2018, they started measuring food waste different and accounting for other ways that where wasted food goes. So that's this other food management, this brown bar that you see jump up here. It's not that it was something new that's happening. It's just newly being recorded and measured. So now it's showing up in the data. And this is where maybe food, what they call food recovery. So gleaning programs might go, or if food is getting routed and maybe it's being used for animal feed, they started tracking that and including that. And so that's that brown part there. The blue is that some of our food waste is going to incinerators and where they're trying to recapture that energy after they do the combustion of it. And then this biggest chunk is that a lot of our food waste is going into our landfills. So this looks a lot different than the graph I showed earlier with our yard trimmings, where more of the yard trimmings are getting going into compost systems. With our food waste, all of our scraps, more of that is going into landfills. That's it for graphs. Hopefully that gets your trends. Now here in Marion County, they've done a couple spot surveys, and there's a little bit different data. It doesn't present as well as this because it's on a spreadsheet, but you get the idea. The trends are similar across where we are. So let's talk about landfills for a minute. So why are they a problem? What's the big deal? This is where the food waste and some of our yard waste goes. So one thing is that they're a finite space. So you can't, once you're filling it up, there's a set amount of space. They are also generate high amounts of methane. This is a gas that greatly contributes to the effects of climate change. Landfills do have to do methane recovery, where they'll put in wells and they can generate energy off of that. But there's always waste at that point. They can't get 100% of the methane off. And there's many alternative ways. We don't have to send our food waste or our yard waste to landfills to create then another system or another set of problems. This is a field that if this is your sparks interest in you, you can really dive into this, get numbers, get interested in seeing what's happening at the local level, right? So our Coffin Butte landfill, there's a lot of information out there. But I do want to talk about some of the specific things that we were here today. So one is we're going to talk about food waste first, and then I'll switch and talk about yard waste. Excuse me, because they are handled a little bit differently. So food waste management at home. So we're not necessarily going to talk about the whole system of, agriculture production and the waste at all points. You can dive into that. We're just going to go at the point where we as consumers, we're now eating and we are creating waste at home. There is this graph, and I'm going to show you this triangle here and we'll talk through this a little bit. So this is another piece of information from the EPA. I've heard that they're going to be redoing this graphic to make it a little bit more user-friendly. But basically, it's talking about what they call food recovery. So we know we have food waste. We know that a lot of it is still edible. So, maybe from gleaning or food scraps or things that we can still use. There's different ways to use the food and be thinking about it. And so this little upside down pyramid here is talking and sort of doing a hierarchy of the best to the least, thinking about food recovery. Sorry, the allergies have got me. So your very best option is to think about preventing food waste, right? And this graphic is thinking about the whole food system, but it's good to keep in mind even when you're thinking about at home. So thinking about how much food we're making, how much perishable food we're making, and then moving down to the next one, recognizing that we can do donations. So before food spoils, we can get that to people that need this food. We can then moving down, a lot of our food waste is great animal feed, so it can get diverted to that. So you think about those programs in the fall where people have their Halloween pumpkins, and then you can get those to farm animals who will eat them instead of having that end up in a landfill. You can think about industrial uses is maybe not so much for the home level, but ways that you can convert waste into fuel. And then composting is a little bit, a less preferred, right, other than prevention. And then your very last resort for food waste is going to landfill or going to incineration. So at the home level, always be thinking about preventing your food waste. And a lot of the ways that you can do this is by being thoughtful. So, and I struggle with this, and I think everybody who's a busy, person is going to struggle with this. But the more you can plan ahead, the less waste that you will create at home. So meal plans. I took the Master Recycler, which has been rebranded program, and they showed us a really interesting study talking about those meal kits and how they actually, you end up with less waste from those. You would think they would have all this, packaging, but the economic or the environmental benefits is actually better because you're wasting less because it's exactly what you need. You can do this on your own too with planning, especially with the things that are thrown away the most. So like the fruits and vegetables are the highest percentage of things that get disposed of. And then along with the prevention of food waste is also just really up your food preservation skills. So there's many methods to do this at OSU. You can learn a lot from our Master Food Preserver program of, freezing and drying and canning things. There's ways that you can do this. I've seen folks that have a special bin in their fridge and it says it's labeled eat this first because they know there's things that are going to be rather than opening the fridge and getting overwhelmed, they've sorted it out so that they know then at that point, like these are the things that we really need to focus on eating because they're going to go bad first. This is a busy slide, but I really like it because it shows how to be thoughtful on food recovery. And this is actually from a organization that helps big like hospitals that are dealing with cafeterias and patients. So they have things on this graph that may not apply to us, but I like the concept of this, and it's things that we can also use at home, especially this really this one kind of over here. I don't know if you can see my mouse over there, but it's thinking about, you've purchased this food, maybe some of it's going to spoil and it goes to compost these green bins. And then you're going to prep your food. So you're chopping up, your carrots, and maybe you have the tops or the peels. Those trimmings then can get composted. You have your edible parts, you have what's left over from the plate. And so be thinking about it every step of the way, ways that you can get in and do some composting methods with that, rather than scraping everything off into the garbage, where then it ends up in the landfill, which is where our garbage is mostly going in Marion County. So let's talk about some methods that we might actually be able to use to get rid of some of our food waste. So depending on where you live in Marion County, you may have your garbage service, may allow you to collect your food waste or your kitchen scraps and put them into your yard waste bin, which is really great. So this means it will go then into the municipal composting system and get diverted out from going into the landfills. That's excellent. This is a little blurb from the Marion County Environmental Services website, and it's basically checking with your particular garbage service to see what your options are for this type of curbside composting. And it's just a mixed bin. So I live in Salem, it's our green bin, and everything can go in there. So we keep a small bin next to our sink, and we put all of our food scraps in there, and that gets emptied out, whenever it gets full, every couple of days, and it goes straight into our green bin along with all of our yard waste, and then gets sent to this municipal composting. You can even put something like, one pizza box in there too, because the paper will get composted. So this is a really great option if you live in the limits of an area where your service provider allows this. And it's not hard. You can keep a little bin. It has a lid, and no excuses on that. In my situation though, because I live in a single family home and I have this type of garbage service, sometimes we get questions about, well, what if you live in multifamily housing, right? And so this is where it can get a little bit more tricky. And I know that the county is working on this for food waste, is working with the landlords or the property management to make sure that there's options for folks to do composting or have yard waste bins available. And it's a big conversation. It usually involves a little bit of a higher cost for the facilities manager. But this is going to become really important, because what happens right now is that many places, everything goes into the garbage and then it goes into our landfill. And so there's places where at that point we can divert that out. So at our house, we don't do a lot of home composting. We live in an urban area, and we deal with a very urban pest of rats. And we have seen them in our neighborhood, and we've caught them on our cameras. We know they're there. So we actually don't do a lot of home composting. We use our yard waste bins. But if you are going to do home composting, there are great ways to do it. There's great resources out there. And composting can be done in many different ways. So you might read a publication and it says, this is the way to do it. You can be the high technical composter, or you can be the laid back composter. And it just takes a little bit longer. So there's lots of different methods out there. We teach classes through Extension. You can look for those. We have some demonstrations at our Marion demonstration garden off of Center Street. You can come and chat with us there. This is a screenshot of that list of what can go into the green bins or into a yard waste bin. If you are going to be composting at home, pull out anything that's dairy or meats, bones. I wouldn't try to put a pizza box through your home compost situation. Our home composts tend to not get hot enough. And then you also risk, it gets really pretty gross if you're trying to put meat through a home compost. That's definitely a great way to attract rodents. Some of us are lucky and we have big yards and we can set up one of these traditional compost bins, and we have a bigger space to do this. Many of us don't. So we have to come up with other options. One is what is called trench composting. So this is where in your garden bed, you can dig a little trench and then put your kitchen waste directly in there, cover it with soil. You can do this right next to like shrubs or trees, and over time it will just degrade in place. Again, though, if you have dogs or rodents or anything, they're going to go for this. They're going to want to dig this up and have a great time with this. So it'll all be situational on what you can compost at home. For really small spaces or indoor spaces, give vermicomposting a shot. So I'm in my office at the extension office, and behind me is my worm bin where all my lunch scraps go. We have great resources on this. You can set up a little bin in your office, in your kitchen. Some folks will compost with worms outside. Lots of great resources, but you can do this in very small spaces, and it's great for kitchen scraps. Bokashi composting. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this is actually a type of a fermentation method. We have an expert here within our Marion County Master Gardeners, and she will give talks on this occasionally. So you might see this pop up at the Salem Library. She tends to give talks there. It is a fermentation method. They're using other organisms and in a closed system, and can quickly ferment kitchen waste there. And this is done in a smaller container. So maybe like a 5-gallon container or smaller. So there is a great way if you are in a very small space or in a rental and you don't want to build a compost bin outside. The vermicomposting and this bokashi might be something to look into. And then I came across this nice site. It's called Share Waste, and there's not too many sites in our area yet, but this is a place where if you have scraps or yard waste or kitchen waste or things, you can connect with other folks who would offer up their compost bins to you, or offer up maybe their animals. If you're trying to get rid of those Halloween pumpkins, for example, you can make these connections within our community. And so there are some folks in Marion County that are on this list, or you can add yourself to the list. It's called Share Waste. I think this is out of maybe Australia. So there's more folks in other parts of the country on here, but it is open and available for you to connect. So if you are one of those apartment dwellers and you're really want to, get rid of your kitchen scraps in a more sustainable fashion, try to connect with this group and find a compost buddy. So I'm going to switch gears from food waste and talk about yard waste management. So this is for a subset of folks. So if you are living in multifamily housing and you have landscape service, you're not going to be thinking about yard waste management. You're going to be focused more on your food waste management. For folks that are managing their own landscape, they're going to be creating their own waste off of their landscape. Here's some examples of the types of yard waste that you might have to try to deal with over the year. So leaves in the fall, if you have deciduous trees, they're all going to fall off and you have to figure out what to do with them. If you have a garden with potted plants or annuals, and you want to replant them, you're going to have leftover potted plants with these root balls. Any woody material, twigs, branches, maybe you cut out, that ice storm that went through a couple of years ago, there was so much yard waste from that. And then if you have a lawn, you may be trying to deal with the grass clippings. The same hierarchy, I guess, includes with yard waste. So preventing yard waste is your best solution. And I put up these somewhat, I think these are kind of silly landscape examples, but that's personal opinion. This may be your dream landscape. But these are really heavily landscapes that need heavy maintenance, right? So you have these shrubs and trees that are pruned. Every time you prune, you're creating waste. And these beds are planted with annuals, which then at the end of the season, they're going to die off in the winter. They all get pulled out. And so you're creating waste. But imagine if you were able to convert these types of landscapes into native plants, perennials, things with a more native form that don't need such heavy maintenance, aren't creating trimmings and wasted plants. So get your native plants at the plant sale and convert this type of landscape. You can also create less waste by taking care of those weeds when they're small. So, and I know this is hard and it gets away from you this time of year. It's almost impossible. You could be out there every day and they're going to just grow overnight. But you can create a lot less waste if you can get in there and pinch out little seedlings rather than waiting until they're larger plants. And then you have to deal with this great volume of plant material. So let's talk a little bit about what to do with this type of waste that we are creating. So the leaves, potted plants, twigs, branches, grass clippings. So if you live in an area that has the yard waste bins, so they may be different colors depending on where you live. Mine are green. So this is where you can put all of these types of yard waste, right? So everything can get thrown in there. And in Marion County, you put your food waste in there too. It all gets mixed up. And these end up going into the industrial composting stream. So depending on where you live, they're taken to a facility that will transform this mixed organic waste. They'll break it down into smaller pieces. It will go through industrial processes where these long compost piles or berms are mixed and sorted out by the age of the compost. And then at the end, there is a functional compost that can then be purchased back by consumers. So this is what happens when you put things in your yard waste bin. It goes through this type of process. You can also do this similar on a home scale, right? One of the biggest questions that we get in our office is, what do I do with all of these leaves? So we get this question every fall when it seems like there's that one cold snap and then all the leaves fall off the trees all at once. And then folks are struggling and it's going to start to rain and they don't want the leaves kind of matted on their grass. So yes, you can scoop them up and put them into your yard waste bin. It's best to not push them into the street. I know some folks do that, thinking that they're going to come and get picked up. I know at least here in Salem, they don't, and then they're starting to degrade and then going down into the storm drains. So don't push them into the street. If that's your property, you need to maintain them. One thing you can do with fallen leaves is you can mow some of them directly into the lawn. So use a mulching mower with no bag and just break them up and they can go back down into your lawn. You can also move them over into your garden beds and use them as a mulch. So here in Western Oregon, it rains all winter and that can put a lot of compaction on any garden beds that you have. But if you can move some of these brown leaves there, that can help protect your soil from any erosion, help maintain those nutrients that you put into that soil. And usually by the time it's spring, most of them will be degraded on site. And the ones that aren't, then you can either move to the side or put into your yard debris. Grass clippings. So you do not need to collect your grass clippings like this and bag them and put them in your yard debris. You can actually save a whole fertilization treatment every year just by leaving your grass clippings in place. So if you are maintaining your lawn, these small grass clippings, just let them fall back onto the lawn. They will very quickly dry down and then fall down into the turf, and it will provide extra nutrition. You can totally skip an extra fertilization treatment there. Let's see, you can do on-site composting, so home composting if you have the space. Woody material, it will take a lot longer to break down. You'd be mixing it with your kitchen scraps. There's great recipes out there for composting on your ratios of, browns to greens. And if you are a diehard composter, that's great. You can get a hot compost pile going and maintain it and have it, the material break down a lot faster. You can also be a lazy composter and make big piles and let things break down over a couple of seasons. There's no wrong way necessarily to do this type of composting. Sometimes folks, though, they have a lot of woody material all at one time, where their home compost bin just won't be able to handle this, and they need to get rid of this. So do your best to avoid burning. That's going to add, one, you might not be able to, depending on where you live, but then it's also just going to add air pollution there. A good way to deal with this, if you can, is to use a chipper or a shredder and make some mulch. So you can rent these or purchase one if you have that ability to do that. And then use this bark chip mulch around in your landscape, and it will break down over time. All right, a little bit more. We always get questions about animal waste. I know this isn't yard waste or food waste, but we do get those questions. So I wanted to address it just briefly. So please don't do any composting of your meat-eating animals' waste. So no cat or dog waste in your compost bin. They carry different animal diseases that can get passed to humans. And our composting at home, we don't get hot enough to kill those. So it's best to dispose of them. Other animals like rabbits and guinea pigs, things that are vegetarians, you can try to do some on-site composting of those, and then you can use them in your garden. Best to do any of these with ornamental plants rather than vegetables or herbs, things that you're going to eat. And then the other question I get is, well, I have some property and I'm dealing with noxious weeds. Should I put those into that green bin that goes to the compost? No, it depends on what it is, and it depends on the life stage of the plant. So this is a screenshot from the county website, and you folks here from the conservation district, you can correct me in the Q&A here. But basically, you don't want to put in anything that has any seeds, right? Because even that industrial composting process is probably not going to be enough to kill off anything that's in that seed form. So if it's a small amount, bagging it, putting into landfill, a lot of it depends on what noxious weed you're managing. So you can always reach out to Extension or to the Soil and Water Conservation District to get specific tips on what you're dealing with. But yeah, it depends on what you're trying to compost. So that was the quick overview of how to handle your food and your yard waste. There are some great ways to get involved if this is something that interests you, an area that interests you. And I want to just shameless plug for becoming a master gardener. We offer training once a year, and this is a great way if you are interested in learning more about composting and all of that. You will get that training in the Master Gardener program. If you are interested in the big picture of waste management, where things go, and then educating the public and trying to make a difference in Marion County, I highly encourage you to look into the Marion Resources Movement. This is the old Master Recycler program and is through Marion County Environmental Services. They have completely revamped the curriculum. It's really focused on climate change. And the program is wonderful. There's English and Spanish options out there. definitely, if you see it come across and you have the time, I would highly recommend taking it. It's a great group and a great community effort. And then another of our local agencies that focuses on food waste prevention is Salem Harvest. And this is essentially a gleaning group where they take food that ag producers, they're not able to collect in their normal harvesting. So maybe it's not machine harvestable or they don't have the workers. They will bring in community members to make sure that that food isn't wasted. So the community groups will come in and do the harvesting. And so this is part of that food recovery. And then it gets donated to folks that need it.
So some brands of cat litter advertise that they're compostable. Is it okay to compost those as long as you remove the solid waste? I have heard that the urine is sterile, so okay to compost.
Oh, that's interesting, Linda. I wonder, so sometimes this, when they say compostable, it may mean different things. So like the home garden composting is a lot different than industrial composting. This is the same thing, and we'll get back to cat litter, but the same thing of like the compostable like forks and spoons that you see out there. Like if you take one of those and you throw it in your home compost bin, it's going to be a spoon forever because it has to go through a very specific composting process. I would just be really careful with dog or cat composting, especially if it's something that you're going to then use back on your edible garden, because like toxoplasmosis and the different things that are in there. I wouldn't want to mess with that. So maybe if it's just ornamental bed, but I don't know the research on whether that brand would actually come out any different in the home composting process. I don't know if that makes sense, but you might check and see if you could compost it if you have, the green bin, the mixed organic bin. Maybe check with your provider and see if it's something that they accept in there.
All right. Thank you again, Brooke, for joining us today. And just so everyone knows, this will end up going on our YouTube channel as well for Marion SWCD. So thank you all for joining us today, and especially to Brooke.